everyone. Welcome to the School of Reinvention podcast. I am your host, Roger Osorio. I'm a reinvention coach and author of the book, The Journey to Reinvention, How to Build a Life Aligned with Your Values, Passions, and Purpose. I'm here with John Chappelear, who is a multi-award-winning author, consultant, and speaker with over 45 years of experience as an executive and entrepreneur. John is recognized internationally as an expert in individual and organizational wellness, positive change, culture, communications, and employee engagement. John's book, The Daily Six Simple Concepts to Find the Perfect Balance Between Success and Significance, has been a worldwide success for individuals and organizations trying to become more positive and productive. The Daily Six was awarded the Best Book Award from USA BookNews. John, thank you so much. I've got your book right here. Appreciate you sending me an autographed copy. And I really enjoyed getting into it because I'm all about, finding what are those small steps that build up to something. But thank you again for taking time to share your story, your insights. There are some big stories in there, and we really appreciate your time.
No, I thank you, Roger. I'm very grateful for you to ask me to be on the podcast. When I saw your sort of reinvention, I thought it was a good fit between, what I have been working on now, and I will say right up front, it's an ongoing process on a daily basis. That's why it's Daily Six. It's not read the book and hey, everybody's better now. And if you're a reinvention coach, I mean, it takes a continuous process of rewiring your brain, and versus is this what I need versus is this what will help us all, and that if you grew up like I did. Purpose of thinking of me was what was drilled into me. I mean, that's how you get ahead. That's how you become the person, I've, as my parents would say, as we've driven you to become. For me, we were talking about the initial chapter, the one that sort of goes along with willingness, which created my gift of devastation, and that's
because you have quite the story there. You had some major ups and downs, and I think this is important for our audience because your story, and which you're going to share in a moment, really helps people, I think, understand and also relate in the sense that they've experienced maybe some part of that, some similarity, but also what you're going to talk about in terms of devastating moments that really created opportunities for breakthroughs, I think are going to be great for everybody. So do tell us a little bit about the journey that brought you to the point where the Daily Six Steps were born.
Well, backing up a bit, we'll just say back in the last century, because when you were reading 45 years of experience, I'm thinking, I am really getting old. This is getting scary. Back when my son was very, very young, Dayton was probably 3, I guess, at the time. I was running a large company that I had started way before he was ever born. And, my plan had always been to spend time with my family and see my kids and do all these other things. That's why I quit working for somebody else and started working for myself. And that plan fell apart as soon as I realized I was where the spotlight needed to shine all the time. And when the spotlight needs to shine on me, I need to physically be around. Regardless of how important it is or how unimportant it is, I still physically need to be there. And again, this was before you could zoom in on a call or do what we're doing right now, but still, ego is a very persuasive mindset. It's really important for you. You're the only person can answer these issues. You're the only person can do that. The biggest problem that I have found in coaching my clients is that when you're successful, it's really hard to get somebody to realize there's changes that could be and should be made because, we all measure our success usually by our title or by our income. And if our title is good and our income is going up, then it's like, well, why would I need to change? And that's where these, very painful gifts, if you will let me use some air quotes here, that's where these very painful gifts show up. And for me, I had built a company from scratch over a period of about 12 years. That was I grew up in Washington, D.C., and so it was the third largest company in the Washington, Baltimore area in our industry, and the largest in the state of Virginia in our industry. So it was a substantial company. We had about 400 employees, and we were running shifts 24/7. So, for me, with the ego that I was shouldering every day, I was very excited about how things were going, even though I don't think I paid a lot of attention to what was going on around me. But it was the late 70s I started the business. In the early 90s, there was a financial debacle very similar to the one that was in 2007, 8, 9. So for the people who went through that, where property values went down or loans got called in and that kind of stuff, where they lost jobs, it was very similar to that, except it was really an extreme process because it came on really fast, because it was from an act of Congress, and it changed things from this day to that day. It changed. And so what happened is about a month after the bank decided they would increase my loan from $2 million to $5 million or whatever, and fund the loan and put it in the bank. They decided they wanted to get paid back, because the Congress requirement was they had to take all of their assets, hard assets, all their real estate had to come off their books, because all their real estate was wildly inflated. I think you may have heard stories about this before, and wildly inflated, and it did not represent the liquidity levels of the bank. So the Fed made the banks prove their liquidity based on cash. And my bank was very eager to find loans that were out there that had cash. And so the downside for me is I had run a very good company, and we had a lot of cash on hand, but we didn't have $5 million, to just write a check and then sort of everything is fine tomorrow. We had, that would clean us out kind of thing. And I remember the day, and this is sort of where it started, was, and there's more details in the book, but I remember the day the bank came in and sort of took the keys and said, "Thank you very much. We'll now liquidate everything." And I had a friend of mine who called me and said, "You do understand that you owe $5 million and you have about $20 million worth of assets, right?" And I'd never been through this before. I was always on the positive side of growth. And I said, "Well, I assume what they'll do is they'll gather the assets, sell whatever they sell for $5 million, and then they'll leave." He said, "That's exactly right, except they're going to sell all your assets for $5 million. That's what they're going to do." And that's exactly what they did. They came in and sold $20 million worth of assets for $5 million. They paid themselves back, and then they left. And the day that reality came, it was much longer process in going through the process, but the day that the keys got transferred, the days that friend said, no, they're going to sell everything, was it was one of those, the day that shall live in infamy kind of thing for me. It was a very difficult day, especially when I was, as described earlier, position and income was the key criteria for what John was. John was his title and his income, not his community or his fellowship of friends or anything else. It was, I did those things, but most of those things were done as a component of my money or my position. I was in this club or I was in that club, but they were for raising awareness for me and how philanthropic we were. The philanthropy was wonderful, but it was really sort of, couched in, I want people to think well of me so that they will buy from me kind of thing. So I get home that day, and my son had in the past always met me at the door. And Dayton, as I said earlier, was 3. We had a house that had a separated garage from the house. The house was here, the garage was in the back. So you had to kind of drive down the side of the house, past the back of the house and into the garage. And Dayton would stand at this multiple pane glass door and just, give it one of these kind of things, looking out, looking for Dad. And I come pulling in and, it's no different for him. He's happy as he can be because Dad's home. This is great. And so, I go in the house and he does that sort of normal thing that 3-year-olds do, which is just put their hands up like this and go, pick me up, Dad. And I still remember to this day, he said, pick me up. It's good for you. And I'm still not sure where that came from because I don't remember having heard it before or since. But that day, he was right because my basic position was, look, just leave me alone. I just need to get a couple of drinks and I'll go sit in the library and I'll just feel sorry for myself. I wouldn't have admitted that at the time, but that's what I wanted to do. Just sort of be by myself. Let me lick my wounds and make myself the center of attention. And Dayton would have none of it. He wanted and demanded that my attention be switched from this to this. And so I picked him up and we walked around and he's telling me about what he saw on Sesame Street and the lady who used to come in and sort of work as his nanny during the day when Susan and I were both in the office, what Margot had done and what the dogs were doing and all these other things that I had absolutely no interest in hearing about. I mean, no interest at all. I'm thinking to myself, where can I put this kid down? I got to put this kid down. This is driving me crazy. I got to get away from this guy. Maybe he'll put me in a good mood. I certainly wouldn't want that. So we used to chase each other around, and it's too bad I used to have them here. They're in the bathroom now. But he made me these 2 little figurines of a father and a son with towels. And we used to roll up towels and chase each other around the house and snap the towels at each other. I would snap the ground, not the child. So he was perfectly happy snapping me, but I didn't. I certainly was not going to snap him. A 35-year-old snapping a 3-year-old kid is probably somebody's going to get reported doing something like that. So but we did that all the time, and we had a really good time doing it. The house was laid out in such a way that you could run through into the living room, then back through a couple of office bedrooms, and then back into the kitchen, back into the dining room, back into the living room. And you could go around and around and around. And I'm running along following this kid, and he is laughing like, if you've ever seen these Instagram videos about little kids laughing, the only person that sounds like that is a 2 or 3-year-old that sounds with this just exuberant giggling. And his laughter went through me like the way a jacuzzi works on knotted up muscle. It just, regardless of my desire to stay angry and self-focused, he worked against all of that and got me to change my focus, find myself enjoying the running around, the towels, the laughter. And finally, we ended up on the floor, sort of looking at each other about this far apart, my head, his head kind of thing, and just laughing. And that was the very beginning of my belief that it isn't what happens, it's how you react to what happens.
Yeah.
And I know that's one of those wonderful, very tried and overused, cliche kind of things, but I could not imagine a worse day. I mean, now that I've been married to Susan for 35 years, if we weren't together for some reason or another, I can imagine a worse day. But I guarantee you, one of the phrases I used to use back in the day was, I lost everything that was important to me. And in those days, I thought I had lost everything that was important to me. I had lost my business. I had lost my prestige. I had lost my season tickets to the Redskins. I had lost all these other things that had taken me 12 years to accomplish and accumulate. And having grown up in a very competitive family, it was devastating. But here's this little 3-year-old. It's like Yoda wandering around my house. It was just the craziest thing, because all of a sudden it's like, I'm actually in a good mood. I'm happy. I'm laughing here, and the pain of what was going on about a half an hour ago is really sort of now in the background, not in the foreground. And I am paying attention to my son, and that brought Susan in. And so we were sort of sitting around and we were talking about it. And of course that brought up a lot of tears and emotion that I was raised to sort of block out. The idea was, if you're a guy and you're a leader and then you don't show any weakness. You don't. I had mentors back in the day, and it was exactly the same. I mean, you just didn't show any weakness. You just, you were supposed to, for some reason, supposed to be omniscient and, and have all the answers. And the reality is that's absolutely not the case. But it takes, in most cases, it takes some kind of pain. And you were talking about your listeners, and I'm thinking, I've in workshops I've done, I've said to people, have you ever lost a job and had to move home only to find that the next door neighbor has the best job available that you've ever imagined in your whole life and he offers it to you? Or you broke up or got divorced or for some reason and you had to move with friends, and through that relationship you met the love of your life. But if the first thing hadn't happened, the second thing would have never happened. And for me, I guarantee you, if that interruption of ego had not happened, I'm sure I would still be playing golf a couple times a week, and I would be 60 miles wide and 1 inch deep as far as a human being goes. Because it would be all the stuff on the top and none of the, well, everybody's these days has seen that iceberg video, or the iceberg meme. I would be the top piece of the iceberg, and the bottom piece would be divorce, children really don't like you, they really, it's just all the personal stuff. That's how I grew up. I mean, everybody loved my father except the family, because he was this, hey, how's it going kind of guy until he got home, and then he would take all of his frustrations out on us. And, that's how I learned. So I joyfully carried that right into the next generation. And it wasn't until, Dayton sort of turned me around that day that I started thinking maybe I need to rebuild my life on a different set of principles. And that's how the Daily Six gets started.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that you got into entrepreneurship in order to pursue other values, other things that were important in your life, because you're like, I want to take control of my life. I want to take control of my time and do all of these things so that I can perhaps spend more time with my family and be with your, I believe it was your daughters, right? Those were your oldest kids, and with your spouse at the time, and all of those things. And then you find yourself down a path where, you went after these other goals, and all of these things happen. And I think it's really interesting because something I've been following lately is a lot of YouTubers who've been doing their YouTube work for years now, maybe 10 years, and they're quitting. And what they're finding is that what they often say is that when I pursued this, very similar to you, I was looking for, I wanted to take control of my time. I wanted to do the kind of work that mattered to me.
Right.
And they found themselves losing sight of that. And all of a sudden they find themselves having to, just pursuing more growth, more followers, more, dollars per video that they produce, or, all of those things. And then they stopped for a moment and realized, wait a minute, what happened here? This is exactly what I was trying to get away from. And somehow I have found myself back into there.
Exactly.
Not the old way where it was for somebody else, by their own making. Like they designed it this way, and and then, it would cause them to quit. And I'm hearing a very similar, I mean, this is a story that, of course, this is not the first time this has ever happened. And this happened to you a while.
Sadly, it won't be the last time it ever happens either. I mean, there'll be somebody out there going, yeah, but I'm smarter than that guy. I can figure this out. And until your wife walks in and goes, okay, that's it. I can't take it anymore. Or your kids, just, I don't know why they don't come over anymore. They used to come over, kind of thing. And so the phrase that I used to use is if more is all you're shooting for, then more will never be enough. Because it was never enough for me, whether the company was doing $500,000 or $60 million. I always was living, I finally determined I wasn't really living a life. I was living a marketing plan. And I was living about 20% below expectation all the time. So that's that, I got to keep this nose on the grindstone. I got to stay here. I got to be, physically present. I'd love to come home, honey, but I got to do this. And I've got stories of coming home at, late at night and having, happy anniversary balloons tied to a chair, and all the lights are off in the house. And yet, I forgot all about the anniversary and the dinner and all the people that were invited. And,
I remember that story in the book. And
I can't tell you. I cannot tell you what caused me to be late, but I can tell you I missed it.
That part really stood out to me when you mentioned.
I mean, I've got a daughter whose oldest son is going to college this year. So, okay. And Lisa, when she knows she wants to sort of, needle her dad a little bit, reminds me of the soccer games that I missed when she was in elementary school, or the play, or the back to school nights, or those things that were just, my wife will take care of those things. Those are things, you don't need to be present. And the good news is those girls Lisa's about 16 years older than Dayton, and Aaron is about 12 years older than Dayton. So I had an opportunity here to, as I rebuilt my life on a new set of principles, I had an opportunity here to actually do what I said I was going to, coach the soccer team rather than just worry about showing up every once in a while for a soccer game.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I do these things for me. If, a 10-year-old kid isn't really going to go, I'm so grateful you took off this afternoon and coached my soccer team, Dad. I mean, that don't say that. Nobody says that stuff. So it's got to be for this. It can't be, I got to be doing this because I want to do this. I don't want to treat you well because then you'll treat me well. I want to treat you well because that's the person I want to be. And that's it. That's the only reason I do what I do today is I'd like to help you figure out how to get where you want to go. And if you get there, that's great. And if you don't get there, that's okay too. Just you do what you need to do. I will definitely clear the path and show you how to get where you need to go. And you can either put in the energy or not put in the energy. But permanent personal change takes a long time. And it doesn't require a gift of devastation. I mean, you can go on a low-fat diet without a heart attack. Doesn't require it, but I know a whole lot of people who don't go on one until after the heart attack or the bankruptcy, and then they're financially smart, and then the divorce, and they become a very good parent every other weekend. So, we don't require these gigantic explosions in our lives, but those are the things that get our attention. So,
How... before we move into, because I want to start talking about the daily 6 steps that came out of all of this devastation. I'm thinking about the listeners who might be in a similar position, but perhaps not as far down the road as you are. Maybe they're at a place where they can still do something about it. To your point, it's not, the heart attack hasn't happened yet.
Right.
They could still change their diet.
Right.
And I think what I want to ask you, because you've clearly taken the time to reflect on all of this, how does it unfold? How do the days turn to months, turn to years, where you just lose more and more track of those things that matter to you, and before you know it, you're like in the book, you shared you're living in the guest house,
right?
And
right.
You're not, the relationships have broken down,
right?
I think that we've all experienced this, but maybe we haven't all reflected as much as you have on that experience. How do we get to that point and miss it and not notice that this is happening?
Yeah. That's a hard question because it's of course going to be different for everybody. Some people are going to be. I do a lot of work with people in recovery. I took a daily 6 and created a recovery program for it. Not to replace 12-step programs, but there's nothing in 12-step programs that brings the addict, alcoholic, and the family back together again. So I understand this desire for long-term personal positive change. And, an addict and alcoholic doesn't really realize that they have destroyed the people's lives around them. They think everything's kind of, if today didn't explode, then life's really good. And that's the same issue. The thing that I've learned over time is that I have to ask the people who I say are important in my life. So I have to give them a position of importance by asking them how I'm doing. How am I doing as a dad? Tell me the truth. How am I doing as a husband? I can assure you that was never a question I ever asked my girls when they were growing up, and never a question I asked my wife when we were married. It was a question I started asking Susan, who was Dayton's mother. And it's amazing what you'll get back. You can also ask, I started another company within a couple of months, and it was built on much more aligned with Daily Six. And it included a lot of communication back and forth about how is this reasonable? Does this seem fair? You have enough time to do this? And those kinds of questions ended up with a highly engaged workforce who worked much more effectively and much more productively than the workforce back at the huge company. So therefore, it generated a lot less stress in me, allowed me tremendously higher levels of free time. So it's almost, I know they taught you this in business school, but you really need to do this. So it's, and it's what I talk about today, which is if you want an engaged workforce, the difference between an engaged couple and a couple is emotion. Okay, that's the difference. Otherwise, you're just a couple. If you're engaged, then there's some level of emotion. And it's the same way in working. If you want to work and build an engaged, connected, and included workforce, there has to be emotion involved in the leadership component. And that is a very uncomfortable position for leaders to be in. I coach people, they go, I can't say that. I'm like, yeah, actually you can say that. And then they come back a couple of days later and go, God, I couldn't believe it. Everybody was like, came up to me at the end and was thanking me for the straight talk and that the trust is going. I'm like, people want to trust where they work. Yeah. They want to trust the people, but they've been so violated. Their trusts have been so violated over so many other employments and other jobs that you think all you've got to do is work between you and this employee. And the answer is no. As leadership, you've got to work between yourself and every employer this person has ever had. Okay. And you have to overcome all of the violations of trust and the violations of security and secrecy and whatever privacy they felt like they needed to have. All of those things that have been violated in the past, you not only have to prove yourself better, but you have to be consistent long enough to get them to let down their guard and begin to trust again. And when you get there, the performance, the mood, the culture, everything just changes as if by magic almost. But it's a lot of hard work, and it's a real solid, consistent focus on something other than how's our strategic plan going.
So I one of the things that really stood out there was, what you said about how you approached your second relationship, your second marriage, and that very important strategy of checking in. So, to your point, it's going to be different how these things unfold. And I'm sure there's some psychology and some neuroscience to help us understand some of this. But where you shifted our focus to is, well, we may not know exactly how, and that's okay, but we can find out where we are. Right. The scorecard. Are things okay or are things not okay? Yeah. If we stop and ask those people that we say matter, because I remember in your book you shared, for instance, well, when your daughters were upset with you and your first wife was upset with you, you're thinking like, I'm doing all this for you. Like, what's why is that? Why are you guys upset with me? I'm doing this for you. But it was also clear based on your writing that, well, you weren't really doing it only for them, and perhaps you were doing it more so for yourself. As you mentioned, your ego, like that got away from you. And before you knew it, you were doing it for you, for number one. And that's where you lost sight of the people that you were originally doing it for. And I think this is so important because, we can learn from you that, hey, let's check in on ourselves, because listeners might be on different parts of this journey. Some might just be beginning this, and this is good for them to know right away. Hey, you're about to embark on first-time entrepreneurship and reinventing yourself into a founder, perhaps for the first time in your life. This is an important story to be mindful of. This is something that you want to make sure you don't lose sight of early on, because, well, it only gets harder later, and it might become too late, as it was in your story where you eventually had to move out. And so maybe we can stop that, but some might be earlier on the journey where it's already starting to move in this direction. And if they can catch that before, again, to use your example, before the heart attack happens, like, let's start improving our diet. Let's start making those adjustments to our lifestyle so that we can get back on track. So let's move into the daily 6 habits, daily 6 steps. What are take us through the 6 steps and just give us a quick little kind of, description of each step.
Well, the 6 components are actually 7, but I combined 2 of them together because I liked 6 better than 7.
Yeah.
Cubby already had 7 covered. I didn't want to get involved with that.
There you go. I hear that.
Yeah, that's right. For me, the first thing had to be willingness. I had to be willing to try new things because that's very uncomfortable. I had to be willing to find new teachers to teach me these new lessons, which is also very uncomfortable, especially if you're successful and entrepreneurial. You have a tendency to think all the answers are here. They're all right here. I just have to dig a little deeper. And the answer is, if you just sit down with a few people that you trust and like, they don't even have to be in the same industry as you, and talk about your challenges, talk about your issues, and talk about your fears. You'll get, if you've picked the right people, you'll get straight answers. You'll get people that will help bring you back. One of the simplest things that an individual can do, especially with willingness, is willing to look at the decisions that you're making and decide who is going to benefit the most from this decision. Is it going to be me or is it going to be us? Because if it's me, then it's probably you're heading down the path in the wrong direction. If it's us, then it's probably you're at least still following along on the new path. Because when you have everybody pulling together in the same direction, whether it be your family, and they're trying very hard to make sure everybody is connected and included together, that makes living in your family much easier. Same way with your work or your team or your departments. When people begin to believe that you have their best interests at heart, and that's not necessarily automatic with children or wives or husbands. It's not automatic, especially based on your behavior. If you say, I love you, but you don't exhibit anything, that's why it isn't the words that create the connection. It's the actions associated with the words. And I talk about that with emotion. Emotions are not just feelings. Emotions primarily are the actions associated with the words. What am I doing to say you're really important to me? Yeah. What am I doing to prove to myself and to you that I do love you? What have I done in the last couple of days that has said, you are the most important person in my life? It's important that we connect. And so with willingness, it is finding new teachers to teach us new lessons. So I have a friend of mine who reads a new book every week, and I can't say I'm quite that on that level, but I do have a stack of books behind me, not quite as thorough as yours, but I'm always looking at new books. I'm always reading my Kindle. I'm always looking at new things, and one of the things that they say in recovery when I was working with people there is, instead of comparing out, that's not like, I don't have any of these issues, I don't have any of these problems. Compare in. What can you say or what can you think about that says, I might have those challenges too. And so when you're reading something new or you're listening to someone new, try to compare in to what you're reading or what they're saying. Because I've met people who this is just baloney. This is just absolute, touchy-feely kind of thing. And it's not as bad today. I mean, when I first started talking about this stuff, it was, mid-90s, and people were sort of thinking, this guy has totally lost his mind. But the employees were happy. I was very happy because the business was very successful, and I was able to go to, back to school nights and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So that number 1 is willingness. Number 2 is quiet time. I use quiet time to set my day in the right direction. I say, if you set your heart and your mind in the right direction, your life will follow. And so that's quiet time's job. Quiet time is to sort of get me to let go of, whatever is coming in on my, the noise that's coming in on this little lovely thing that never gets more than a couple of feet away from us. It's very hard to learn to turn these things off. And I think when I wrote the book, I wrote overnight faxes. And, nobody gets overnight faxes anymore, but we get lots and lots and lots of overnight emails. And we got workplaces that don't honor personal time. They just send you emails. They expect you to read them and respond to them at any time of the day or night. And I think that's heading down the path on the wrong direction, because you're not beginning to build a stronger relationship, because this is not a situation where this person thinks you have their best interest at heart. They think you have your best interest at heart. That's why they send you an email at 9:00 at night, and expect you to do something about it. So quiet time is really just sort of finding a little space in your day. And it's a process of going on throughout your day, not just, I spend 10 minutes in the morning in meditation and then, good.
And that's it.
You have to, my intention and my actions. And this is where quiet time comes in. I set the intentions for the day, usually in quiet time. Today, I want to be this, I want to do these things. And if I don't pay attention, then I will wander away from those intentions. I just, it's like, what's the old story about airplanes have to check in about every 10 minutes to make sure they're still on track to end up.
Yeah, they're always course correcting because they always go off course and you got to get back on.
Exactly. And that's the way intention and actions are. I'm setting up an intention to be, loving today, and I got cut off in traffic on the way home. Am I walking in the back door of the house loving? In a loving mindset? Or am I really pissed off and I really can't wait till I can tear into somebody? So it's a matter of making sure that the intention that you set follows you through the day. And there are little techniques to learn how to do that, to sort of keep bringing it up and bringing it up. The third component is service, focusing on service to others. I spent a lot of time taking care of service to me. So I figured I probably done a whole lifetime of service focused on me. So the idea is just find something, and it's not very hard. I mean, I've got a disabled neighbor. I mow his lawn. And it's just like neighbors across the street are like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, he can't mow his lawn clearly, and he can't afford to have it mowed. So I got a mow lawnmower right here. I just mow his lawn. It's no big deal." I remember when Dayton was little, we would in D.C. We would drive down to the beach and we would go over the Chesapeake Bay bridge, and that was a toll bridge, and pay the toll of the guy behind you, kind of thing. And he's like, "What are you doing? This is insane. You can't do that." Or stop and give a homeless guy a couple of bucks. And this is a scam, Dad. These guys make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I'm like, really? Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Okay, well, you and I are going to get some cardboard signs tomorrow, and we're going to find a really good spot, because I'd like to make a couple $100,000 a year. but come to the realization that these people are struggling, and be grateful about the fact that, not that, I feel good about it. I'm in a position where I can actually do something about it. That's why I mow the guy's lawn, or that's why I help somebody up the street, or whatever it might be. But I also spend a lot of time at work asking if there's something I can do to make what I've asked you to do. Is there something I can do to make that easier? Can I make it faster, better, quicker? Do you need more help? Do you need more money? Do you need more time? Tell me what I can do to get roadblocks out of your way. Because that's what leadership to me is all about. It's about building that emotional connection and then getting the roadblocks out of the way of the people who are trying to be successful. And so service is, just moving from dancing along in the spotlight to holding the spotlight for other people. Well, I guess.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, I like that.
The next one is love and forgiveness, which are the two I was talking about before. Because for me, love and forgiveness are two sides of the same coin. And it really can't be loving unless you're forgiving. And you can't be forgiving if you're not loving. Love, the way in which I describe it in the book, is understanding the needs of others and treating those needs as important as if they were my own.
Yeah.
That's it. And that works just fine if it's a child or a spouse, coworker, subordinate, superior, minister, baseball coach. That, if I realize that their needs are as important as my own, it changes the way in which I relate to them, because they're not. And for people, it's especially important for people who tend to undervalue themselves. They're always the people who, well, I know, but it's okay. Don't worry about me, kind of thing. I'm not trying to say that you are more important, but you're certainly not less important. You're as important, okay? And so your needs and your values and what's important to you is important to me. So let's talk about ways in which that can work. And that changes every relationship that you have. It just does. And forgiveness, the phrase that I have stolen from a good friend of mine many, many years ago, is giving up all hope of a better yesterday. And it's just not here anymore. So you can drag it around or not. And I see that when when you see things like the one that's most obvious is when you see somebody who's going through being executed through capital punishment. I know this sounds like a weird story, but you hear the people who were the victims going, now I can finally move on with my life. And I'm thinking, this has been 25 years since this accident happened and this execution happened. And you've been on hold for 25 years? Oh my God. That's not what you do. You're letting this person live they're controlling too much of a majority of your life. You can't let people wander around up here in your head, whether they're people who say things that bother you and upset you. You need to learn that forgiveness is the key. Forgiveness is the key to almost any issue I have. It's right up there with acceptance. Probably if I had it to write over again, I'd add acceptance into the daily six somewhere. But forgiveness is simply realizing that this has nothing to do with the person that you're forgiving. This has to do with me taking the emotions I'm dragging around to work, to home, in the car, in the grocery store, and acting out in ways that I don't want to act out. And I'm letting those go for my own good. And as I do that, it's funny, as I begin to forgive, I don't put as many new resentments and anger, frustrations and judgments. I don't pick those up as easily as I used to anymore.
Yeah.
Number 5 is gratitude. And so the idea is to learn to be grateful for all things at all times. Not just, I got this great new job or we moved to this beautiful new home. I was definitely not grateful for my gift of devastation, but probably within a couple of years, I was very excited and happy about it because it had revived my marriage. It changed the relationship with all my kids. I had a nice new business started. The people who were working there were excited and happy. We were doing a really good service for people. So it's like, well, yeah, but it took me a little while. I remember people saying, a friend of mine said to me, one of these days you're going to be grateful that the bank did this. I thought, yeah, I'm not really sure that's ever going to happen. But it eventually did. Eventually it was like, I wouldn't be on this path if this had not happened. I guarantee you, I would have just, that's the problem with failure, is that it's such an amazing learning tool if you use it. If you ignore it, it doesn't help you much. But you can use, that's why, what is it? Churchill said, success is moving from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And that's really what a gift of devastation is. It's just a gigantic explosion of failure. But stepping back from that and realizing there's got to be a lesson in here. There's got to be a lesson in here, and I'm committed to finding it versus committed to being sucked down this drain of self-pity and anger and judgment. And then finally, the number 6 is action. And that did come from years and years of reading self-help books and realizing that most self-help books just describe the thing, whatever the thing is, and don't say, okay, now go do something. And so for me, it's really kind of useless to think about sharpening the saw or first things first, unless I'm going to actually do those things. So if I'm going to be grateful, where am I going to start? If I'm going to be loving and forgiving, where am I going to start? And so for me, it was with the people closest to me. It was kind of like an ever-expanding circle. Once the family was reconnected and the family was happy, then it became employees. And once the employees were there, then it became the customers. And then it became the community. And now it's pretty much, wherever I am, hopefully I'm not creating any turmoil or stress. And if I am, hopefully I've generated enough of a relationship that somebody can say, are you not having a good day today, John? Because you really don't sound like yourself. So, I'm really glad that what's happened to me has happened to me. I just don't think I could have been here without that. I just think I needed to be sort of crushed like a grape in a press before I could come out the other side. I think if I had gotten, and this is one of the issues you were talking about, people are just beginning on the path, is to start thinking that I'm not the solution here. The more I step back and let the solution sort of manifest itself. But I can guarantee you, if the bank had come in and said, give me my money back, and I had had these negotiations with them, and they went, okay, we're going to be 5 more years. I probably would have gone, I fixed it. It's all me, kind of thing, because my ego was running mad. And so this is one of the reasons why it's really important to ask. Even I've had many, many, many clients build an informal board of directors with friends in different industries, but who are in leadership positions, and meet once a month, buy them a dinner and a couple of drinks, and ask them how does it seem like we're doing? Here's my books, here's my stuff, here's my questions. How are we doing? And ask people that you trust, and ask people that you believe will give you a straight answer. How it's going, how it seems. What does it look like from out here looking in? Because I know what it looks like from in here looking out, but the more
it's that check-in.
Say it again.
It's that check-in, as you said. Yes, just like you did with your spouse and your kids. It's doing it with others as well, and building a board by design that you can check in with even more regularly, perhaps. There's a big idea that you touch on in the book, which I think is really important to this particular audience. And it's this conflict perhaps between, living this life that is purposeful and you're doing good for the world. And also, hey, I have these goals for things that I want and material goals that I have, a certain amount of lifestyle that I want, or a certain amount of, wealth that I want to build, or whatever it might be. And in your book, you put it as this balance between spiritualism and materialism, how bringing these two, that there's a way to do this. These two can coexist, and there's a way to do that. Yeah. You talk about that, because I feel like that is something that as people start moving into this journey, and going back to that example I gave you of YouTubers who are quitting because they're realizing, oh my gosh, I went the way of the material too much as a result of pursuing more and more and more. And I'm thinking about one in particular who I was part of a community she led, and she even talked about the items that she bought, that she wondered, why did I have those items? Like, why did I have that car? I'm not even interested in that car. But she checked in on herself and realized, I bought it because I thought I had to have that. Right. And then and now has created that balance. Talk about that balance as people set goals, as people look forward.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when I first started talking about this, it was right about the time that people were beginning to talk about emotional intelligence. I didn't realize the Daily Six really was an emotional intelligence process until people started talking about emotional intelligence. I have actually spoken at 2 of their international conferences, and they asked me because the concept of practicing the Daily Six will help make you emotionally intelligent. Because using those emotional concepts like love, forgiveness, gratitude,
absolutely,
move you away from just strictly intellect and move you towards being driven by emotion. Spiritual, it's interesting because just in the last 3 months or so, I've started hearing spiritual intelligence. Not necessarily, not IQ and not EQ, but SI or SQ, however you want to think of it. I think that the way in which you have to go about working, and I've been working for myself since way before you were born, probably. So it's a little different for me because I don't work in a traditional organizational environment. But there are plenty of times where I've sat around going, boy, I wish I had a 501c3, or I wish I had a retirement plan. And then the phone rings and something happens, and all of a sudden changes occur. I remember I spent most of 2005 to 2020 in Saudi Arabia working. From a woman called me up that she had read something I had written online about how to do an inclusive organizational change that's not driven by a strategic plan, but by an emotional agreement to the strategic plan. And that was 10 years of amazing income. Just the phone just rang. I can't tell you what happens when you live on a more spiritual level is that things become bizarrely coincidental. It's like, I really was thinking about this and all of a sudden the phone rang, or I was thinking about this in quiet time today. And that's why it's all kind of the way it is the idea is that I'm willing to do the things that make me uncomfortable, because most of the things in the Daily Six will make you uncomfortable. And then I'm willing to sit down each day, or maybe 3 or 4 times a day, and sort of open myself to whatever's going on around here. I'm not trying to proselytize a religion or spirituality or anything else, but just give yourself a chance to let some space open up in here so that you're not constantly trying to drive yourself forward. And you'd be amazed that, yesterday in quiet time, a guy's name popped up that I had completely forgotten about for probably a couple of years. And I remember he said, well, I can't do this right now, but give me a call back in a couple of years and we'll talk about this. And a guy has a big retreat center in Mexico, and he wanted me to come down and do Daily Six stuff on a regular basis for people who wanted to come for 3 or 4 days as a retreat process. And he just wasn't ready to do anything like that because he was taking over from his dad, and it was really more of a little hotel than it was a retreat center. And so now it's back on my list of things to do tomorrow is to call and see where he is on these things. And those are thoughts that would not come up were I trying to just push my thoughts through. Spiritual balance requires me to be willing to sort of take a step back a little bit. I like to think of life as, we have a little bit more control, but really the only control we have is over our thoughts, and then occasionally how we react to those thoughts.
Yeah.
So, if we sort of think of life as riding on a train, and it's going, your life is the tracks, and you're looking out the window enjoying the view. You're not up in the front of the train trying to turn the train because it's on tracks and it's going the way it's going. So your job is to relax and find a way to maximize your ability to be worthy of the gift that you've been given, which is today. What are you doing? I find friends online that I've connected with all over the world that have very similar thought processes and are constantly writing things that help inspire me, and I write things that inspire them. And so it's a matter of staying close to the energy. It's, if you want to be, I say this about entrepreneurial businesses, and this is when you're starting something new like this, it's very much, even if it's personal, it's very much like an entrepreneurial business. When it's just you, a small fire in the middle is easy, but when it's 50 or 60 people or 7 or 8 locations, it's got to be a bigger fire, and so everybody can't gather around that much. So when you're trying to learn to live according to spiritual values, you have to build this fire up enough so that you begin to trust it, and it begins to warm you inside. This is starting to sound a little corny, but the idea is learn to trust, and it takes time to learn to trust your decision-making processes because they've been so self-focused for so long. If we start taking action that helps and benefits others, that will lead us to other situations, and those situations will lead us to other opportunities, which will lead us to new decisions. So it's really a matter of just opening the door and letting the breeze blow in. It's just up in here. And you let your hair. I haven't had to worry about that for a while. But you let your mind sort of float along, and it doesn't have. I'm not looking for people to be levitating themselves off the ground or anything else. Just pick an intention. And one of my friends did this when I first wrote. Actually, I had just written the cards. I hadn't even written the book yet. She took the cards and put them on her refrigerator. And every day she would look at it and she would say, today I think I want to be loving and forgiving. And she would work on that. And then the next time she would, and by practicing those kinds of principles, her spiritual intelligence expanded, and her connection and her decision-making got much less selfish and much more selfless. And so it's mostly a matter of exposing yourself to situations that in many times we just didn't want to mess with because it wasn't clearly beneficial to ourselves, and it's, I can't really go do this because I've got to take a call or I've got to go to a meeting, or it's like, well, yeah, okay, but maybe we could just try and ask for a continuance or a change or in something. And the more that you do that, the more comfortable you get with doing that. And the more comfortable you get with doing it, the easier the change becomes. I hope that's helped.
Yeah, no, and there was something you said there about the decision-making part and having, faith that in the decisions that you make, and act, because then you'll act more quickly. Perhaps you'll take decisions that you may not. You could also just let opportunities expire because you're afraid of how things might unfold. What if this? What if that? It reminds me of a piece of advice I got when I was very young, and I was graduating from Penn State University, and I had two really great offers for two companies that I wanted to work for. One that I really, really wanted to work for, the other that I came to start to become very interested in. And I just thought, I don't know how to choose. Like, I have no idea. And of all places, I was actually on a trip visiting one of the offers. They said, hey, you haven't said yes yet. We'd love to have you come over to the site where you would work, sit where you would sit, hang out with us, get to know us a little bit better, and then make your decision. And I thought, well, that sounds like it can't hurt. So, okay, let's do that. And there was somebody who was assigned to me who, kind of had to show me around, take me to the office, all those good things, show me out like the city around and all that, so I can get to know the place better. And he asked me, so what's going on? Like, what's holding you back from accepting or rejecting or just making a decision on this offer? I said, well, there's another offer on the table that I'm really excited about. And honestly, it was probably the one that I wanted for the longest time. And so I'm torn. I don't know how to make a decision. And then he said something that I never forgot. He said, the truth is that you could flip a coin right now and just go with whatever the coin tells you. Because chances are what's going to really happen is you're going to make that decision, great or not. You're going to make it work. Right. Because what you're not factoring in is the fact that when you get into that decision, you are now in it. You make everything different because you're an ingredient that doesn't exist. So at the moment, but once you exist in it, everything changes, and you're going to make it great or not great, but you will decide at that point how to handle it and how to address it. So you make decisions great. And that was so liberating because it helped me realize that, wow, at the end of the day, whatever I choose, I can make it great. I can make it work, or I can move away from it. But I still have an opportunity to do something about that. It's not the end of anything. There's still that opportunity. And that really helped me just have a lot of faith in how I move forward with difficult decisions.
I mean, that's really important. I mean, that's the key, is that it's everything is just an ongoing cycle of your decisions. I just said one time in a keynote that a day is a series of moments moving at the speed of life. And it's just moment to moment. What are you doing? And once you begin to make decisions, then it leads you to a different decision. And life is just each day is just a series of choices. And I'm finding that if you're using selfless, timeless tools like love, forgiveness, gratitude, those kinds of things, if those are factored into your decision-making process, you have a tendency to end up at the right end of the decision.
Yeah. So last question that I have for you, I really want to put you in a tough spot on this one. So because you've got, look, you really have 7 daily steps. You've condensed them down to 6. Now I know the truth. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you if you could only pick one to practice for the rest of your life every single day, what would be the one that you could absolutely not do without?
Well, you mentioned that when we were chatting at the very beginning, and it kind of stuck in the back of my head, and I thought, wow, what would I use? And the answer that's kept sort of rolling through my head while we were talking is willingness.
Okay.
Willingness is nothing starts unless you're willing. Nothing starts. Unless I'm willing to read something or do something or behave in a certain way or change the way in which I used to do it. Unless I'm willing to do that, then nothing's going to change. These other ideas are great, and really the ideas are 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is action and 1 is willingness. And so for me, it would be willingness. Yeah, I think that's how I would. If I had one to choose from, that would be it.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I appreciate you indulging my question here and picking the one. Nevertheless, go ahead.
No, I just said thank you. I appreciate the interest.
No.
It's always great to find that when you write something, you're hoping that it resounds or at least resonates with certain people.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad it resonated with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and for anybody watching the YouTube video or listening in, the Daily 6, you'll find the link in the show description you can pick up a copy. But what really for me stood out about this is a lot of books have like this big idea, like this big solution. and what I found is, all right, and it's not that those solutions are bad solutions or wrong solutions. They could be actually the perfect solution. But what they don't always do very well is distill that idea down to daily practices. Right. Because I find like the longer term, the bigger whatever the idea or solution is, the more likely I'm going to have to chip away at this one a little bit at a time. And when I have discovered those things on my own, I mean, then I work towards something much better. Mm-hmm. And I can get there in a more measured and, systematic way. I see progress, all of that. But what really drew my attention to this book was, oh my gosh, you're leading with that distilled down version of this is what you do. And then like, hey, I promise you really good stuff comes. And you talked a little bit about what comes after, of course. But I love how you focused on that. And I think for listeners, this is a great book in order to identify what are some of those steps, what are some of those actions that you could take on a daily basis. What are some of those things you can work on a daily basis that will roll up into something so much greater, so much more significant? Right. And, I talk a lot about the journey to reinvention and living a life and building a life aligned with your values, passions, and purpose. And I could not help but obviously see how these 6 steps are steps that help you get to that point. It's what it takes to build a life that's aligned with your values, passions, and purpose. And that's your story. That's exactly your story, because that's what you did. Through the Daily 6, you built that life that is now where you spend time, with your son more. You've had that second chance, and you made the absolute most of it.
Absolutely would not. I would have absolutely been divorced. My wife would be happy to explain that to you. Absolutely divorced. Kids couldn't have stood me another minute. So I'm really grateful that somebody didn't say, oh, okay, well, let's give him 5 more years on this loan. I mean, I look at the things that you lost, and the things I lost are all replaceable. The things that I've gained are irreplaceable. Relationships and a depth of emotion connection to my customers and my family and these things. It's priceless.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. For anyone who wants to get in touch with John, learn more about the Daily 6 or any of the programs that John leads, please check the show notes so that you can see all of the links and follow him on LinkedIn and the different platforms. Thank you again, John.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I enjoyed the talk.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the School of Reinvention podcast. Again, I'm your host, Roger Osorio. If you're ready to start your journey to reinvention and want to walk the path with others, visit www.rogerosorio.com and go to the School of Reinvention to check out for yourself how a community-based coaching platform can help you begin your next reinvention. You can also go to rogerosorio.com to purchase my new book, The Journey to Reinvention, and receive some exciting bonuses. Until next time, make your day great.